Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online. I am your host, Jean Paul Garnier, and tonight we are here with writers and illustrators of the future winners from Writers of the Future Volume 41, fantastic new anthology. Tonight we are joined by Robert F. Lowell, Sandra Skalski, uh, Tre- Tremini Sutcliffe, and Daniel Montefar. And hopefully we'll also have Barlow Crasmont, but I'm not sure if they've arrived yet. We're going to have some excerpts from stories. We're going to have an interview. Is that you, Barlow?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Wonderful. I didn't recognize the screen name. Sorry about that. Everyone's here. Wonderful. We're going to have some story excerpts. We're going to get into an interview and talk all about the contest and the winners that are with us here tonight. First off, I'm going to introduce everybody briefly. I'm going to start with Robert F. Lowell. Robert is a Writers of the Future winner and Baen Fantasy Adventure Award finalist. He expands the universe of online learning as an instructional systems designer and writes about swords, sorcery, robots, aliens, and magic rabbits as a member of the Wolfpack Writers. He, his wife, and at least one dog live in a town with very expensive weather on California's central coast and travel in search of enchantment. Robert, where are you joining us from this evening?
My Central Coast town is Marina, California, which is an exclusive to all our listeners today. And where we do have very expensive weather here, for those of you in hot places, our high was 67 today. So
You're getting off easy. It's 110 where I am. We're also joined by Sandra Skalski. Sandra lives with her husband in suburban New Jersey. She recently retired from a career in chemical engineering, leaving her with actual time to write. Her stories have appeared in Factor 4 magazine, Wild Blood Flash, 100 Foot Crow, Ruth and Ann's Guide to Time Travel, Volume 2, Allegory, and Writers of the Future, Volume 41. When she's not writing, you can find her in her butterfly garden or traveling with her husband. Her greatest joy is spending time with her daughter, son in law, and two beautiful grandchildren. Sandra, where are you joining us from this evening?
From beautiful downtown Mulligan Hill, New Jersey.
Well, welcome. We also have with us Barlow Crasmont. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Barlow. Barlow has lived in the United States, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and China. When not teaching or writing, he dabbles in juggling, solving the Rubik's Cube, and learning other languages. He's been published by the British Science Fiction Association, Mobius Boulevard, and in the 41st Anthology of Writers of the Future. And where are you joining us from this evening, Barlow?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm reporting from northeastern China from a small city called Tieling in Liaoning province. It is now 9:07 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Good to see all of you.
Well, thank you for joining us, fellow time traveler. We also have with us Tremini Sutcliffe. Tremini is winner of the Illustrators of the Future contest, draws inspiration from amazing American landscapes and a lifelong love of fantasy books. She developed her skills through library study, mentorship, and daily practice, and now works in watercolor, oils, and digital media to create imaginative, story driven artwork. And where are you joining us from, Tremini?
I am in St. George, Utah, and oh my goodness, is it hot out up? uh, I think it's been up over 115 degrees for a couple weeks now, and I love escaping inside at this point to just go get some drawing done.
Mhm.
Wow, you make
Your
me
book?
not feel as hot here in Joshua Tree. Uh, Lastly, we're also joined by Daniel Montefar. Daniel is an illustrator based in Houston, Texas, specializing in fantasy and sci-fi. His work centers around dynamic compositions with bold colors and expressive characters that bring stories to life. Daniel loves creating narratives and applying them across a variety of formats, from book and comic book covers to concept art and packaging design. And Daniel, where are you joining from tonight?
Oh, hey, I'm at Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida. Like right now I'm a TA helping out like high school kids do like learn about just drawing and painting. So it's pretty fun here.
Wonderful. One of the things I love about these online events is just being able to gather together despite our geographical differences. It's a truly wonderful thing. Before we get into some excerpts from stories and talking about your art and work, I wanted to ask each of you, and we'll start with Daniel on this one. What made you decide to enter the contest, and how many times did you enter before becoming a winner?
So I entered the contest because I was kind of just like looking how do I like get known in the illustration like industry. I was just trying to find like different contests to like enter to like put my work out there. And like I liked the Illustrators of the Future contest. Like I found it and it was cool because you didn't have to like pay to enter. So that was like, oh cool, I can keep submitting to this one. So I think I entered about like 3 times. Yeah. So yeah, I entered 3 times. Like I started in like high school then, but yeah.
Wonderful. And Tremini, how about you? How many times did you enter the contest before winning, and what drew you to the contest in the first place?
Well, it was the quality of the work that and the stories. The thing that got me learning how to do art was the epically awesome book cover and the painting that was on the book. And, that got me interested in reading, and it made me fall in love with illustration and, just the quality of work that was coming out of the illustrators that were competing in it. I went, there's something there. So I entered, I think, a total of 6 times. I got 2 honorable mentions, a semifinalist, a finalist, and I won. So it's some pretty stiff competition, but just going through and following the illustrators that have won in prior years, looking at the quality of the work, seeing the variety that's there, and just trying to figure out, okay, if their quality of work is winning, what are they doing different than what I'm currently doing? So it was really basically comparing my work to artists that were better than me at that time. To learn and figure out what I can do better. So
Excellent. And Sandra, how about you? What compelled you to join to enter the contest, and how many times and how long have you been entering?
Well, a writer friend of mine won many years ago. And ever since then, I've been buying the anthology and reading the anthology. And I think it seemed like an easy place to actually hit send and submit your work. And I like the fact that I got feedbacks. I think I entered 13 or 14 times before I won. I got several honorable mentions, so I was kind of getting close, and it was very encouraging. So I knew, okay, I didn't win, but I was kind of in the ballpark. So that kind of encouraged me, and I kept entering, and I loved reading the anthology.
Truly. And Barlow, how about you?
I started entering the Writers of the Future contest back in 2022. I think I entered about 7 or 8 times. I got a couple of honorable mentions, and by some chance, I ended up winning. Even though I think that in the past I've submitted better stories that didn't win, but this one, I guess, happened to appeal to sensibilities on one of the judges, and sometimes that's just how it goes.
Indeed, taste can be subjective. And how about you, Robert?
I entered about 5 times before my sixth story made it into the winner's circle. I've been getting honorable mentions. I got a silver and so on. But the quarter before I won, I actually got my worst result of all, which just shows that even if you don't get the results you want, just keep trying, and keep making it part of your journey as a writer to see as a kind of a guidepost on the way to getting to where you want to be.
Indeed, every writer and illustrator that I've talked to that's won the contest, the common theme is perseverance, which I
Yep.
think is incredibly important. And congratulations to you all for not only seeing it through, but eventually winning.
Mhm.
Um, so at this point in the program, I'd like to have the authors share a brief excerpt of their work so we can hear the winning stuff. Robert, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Let me to put my excerpt in context here. The main character of my story is Lem. That stands for Law Enforcement Military. And he is a very obsolete military police robot who has just been bought out of a junkyard by a woman named Aisha. And in this scene, he finds out why Aisha rescued him from the junkyard. The smell of vomit and weed and the cheap public ride's interstellar interior made me regret I had olfactory sensors. The ride rolled past rich kids in the marina, dodged phase addicts in the Presidio, and headed through Richmond along Geary Boulevard, finally letting me off at the ruins of the Cliff House. Drones hummed overhead. The sea spray smelled of brine and dead shellfish. I discreetly avoided some indiscreet couples and very unlicensed commercial activity and made my way to an outlying building shaped like a giant 20th century camera with a round lens. It once held a projecting periscope that offered tourists views of the city skyline and out over the ocean. Now it was the only room in the ruins that still had its roof. Aisha was waiting for me inside with her hood up. A quick scan showed the same gun in her holster and my kill switch in an inside pocket of her jacket. She took a tiny light globe from another pocket and placed it on a rusty round top metal table. Its harsh light cast sharp shadows. Good evening, Lem. How did you know this is where I'd be? Can you hear my heartbeat or something? Yes, ma'am, I can, now that I've been updated, but I also guessed you would be in the best place for a private conversation. Would you like your bullets back, ma'am? Keep them and stop calling me ma'am. I'd like us to be friends, Lem. You don't strike me as someone who needs to buy friends, Aisha. She stepped toward me to stand face to face. I bought you because I want John Finch tonight. I hacked into Yerba Buena's community services database. Its security protocols were about 3 lines short of being a joke. But to be fair, my code included some army hacking tools local law enforcement never expected to defend against. There's a John Finch wanted for selling phase, statutory rape, human trafficking, and assault with a deadly weapon. Why do you want him? She took off her hood. Because he killed my little brother, Yusef. I'm very sorry. How old was Yusef? 17. How did Finch kill him? With phase. A little phase could make you think you were in heaven. A little more would take you there. Didn't community services investigate? She spat out bitter laughter. Of course they did. To him, he was just another overdose. They couldn't trace the source of the phase, so they let it drop. Par for the course. Yerba Buena hadn't changed much since I was last activated. I won't kill Finch for you, I said. She turned and walked a few steps away. I know. I want him alive. So you can kill him yourself? She paused for a heartbeat before walking back to me. No. Take him to Sergeant Patel at the Sunset District Community Service Station. Where they'll find him dead in his detention cell? She slapped me in the face. The sound echoed in the round chamber. Surf murmured through the concrete walls. Just who do you think I am, Lem? She asked. A woman who loves her brother, I answered, and can't get justice for him any other way. She rubbed the hand she slapped me with. For someone without a heart, you're a pretty good judge of character. I do the best I can with what I have. How can I find Finch? Her black eyes sparkled. So you'll do it? Bringing dirtbags like Finch to justice is what I was made to do. You're giving me a chance to do it again. Plus, you own me. As long as it's not illegal, I have to do what you say. But I wasn't made for detective work. I'm conspicuous by design. My brother said Finch runs a phase crib in Plaza Nueva Luna, room 334, North Tower. Is that where Yusef died? She answered with a single tear. If Finch is there tonight, I said, I'll bring him in, alive. The tear collided with a smile. I knew I could count on you, Lem. If I had a human heart and hands, I would have wiped the tear from her face. Instead, I said, you should put some ice on that hand, and walked out into the fog.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert.
Nice.
While we're on Robert's story, I have a question for you, Robert, about this particular story. It has a very a classic science fictional element of the question, how does morality work in robots? Or would it work in robots? I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your unique take on this and why you decided to go with a police bot.
You know, as part of entering Writers of the Future, I was experimenting with different styles, different themes in short stories. And I just decided one day, what if I tried to do a hard-boiled detective story? And I set it in a future dystopian San Francisco, which has had its name and many other things changed in the story, but not much else. So the street names and so on that I read, and the locations are actually there in the city now. There have been much changed for the 200th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge when this takes place. But the story and the characters, it really evolved when I was writing. So one of the things I decided to do with Lem was I gave him some limitations in his programming, that because he was, programmed for law enforcement, there are certain things he can do, but there are certain things his programming prohibits him to do. So he's a very strong, very capable character, but he's also, because of his built-in limitations, he's also a very vulnerable character. And that's the way we all are, really. I mean, all of us as human beings, we have strengths and vulnerabilities too, but his are different because of his nature as an artificial person. And it's not really a philosophical story, but there is a point in a future conversation between him and Aisha that where she argues that he actually has a soul and he doesn't really believe her. And I leave that as an exercise to the reader as well. Does he have the qualifications for somebody that can make moral judgments, or is he just another machine? And so that's a theme that the story explores, but lets the reader come down on to make their own judgments.
Mm.
Indeed. Sandra, would you care to read an excerpt from your story for us?
Sure. Well, my story is called Slipstone, and it's in first person, and the protagonist is a young boy. I'm not a thief. Sure, I knew the man in the leather coat dropped a green stone in my bucket. He did it before the clerk at the Rock Emporium weighed them, so I paid for it. Maybe I should have been wary of him. With his wide-brimmed hat and knee-length black coat, he reminded me of a magician. While I sorted through the bins of polished stones, he leaned against a display of rock and fossil books I wished I could afford. He had a clean-shaven face, the same shade of brown as my own. Older than 20, but younger than 30. When you're 13, you can't trust people older than 30, you know? Right before I got to the counter, he strolled over to the display cases of expensive gems and fossils. He stroked the back of one of the cases. For a moment, a blue-green haze covered the lock. Smooth as silk, the case popped open. He grabbed a green stone, then shut the door. Magicians in Vegas couldn't have done better. Say what? I said to no one in particular. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but nobody had. When Magician Man looked my way, I froze. He winked at me. As he brushed by me on the way out of the store, he tucked the green stone into the little bucket of stones I was buying. I stepped up to pay. The clerk jumped the contents on the scale. The green stone was oval and unpolished and nothing like the agate, jasper, and obsidian I'd chosen. Nothing fancy, but the Schuster Home for Boys didn't give you lots of spending money. We were lucky to be on a field trip to Niagara Falls. The clerk scooped up the stones and dropped them into a paper bag. I figured the stone was mine, along with a good story to go with it. I forked over most of my cash and ran out to find my friends. A soft drizzle had replaced the afternoon sunshine. The street stall merchants bustled around, covering their wares. I looked in the windows of the other trinket shops for Schuster boys or chaperones, but I'd spent too long buying rocks. They were probably blocks ahead of me. An ice cream truck pulled into an empty spot across the street. The smell of fresh-baked waffles drifted from the back. My stomach growled. I had about an hour and enough money left for a treat before the Schuster bus departed. A hand clasped my right shoulder. Magician Man stood behind me, minus the friendly expression. His fingers dug into my flesh. Come with me, kid. You have something of mine. He steered me around the corner and down a narrow alley. Let's have it. Heart thudding, I twisted away from him and took 2 steps back. The far end of the alley had a low wall, but I could scale it. Magician Man was bigger than me, but the heavy coat would slow him down if I ran for it. I gulped. The alley stank of pee and vomit. I paid for the stones, mister. Trembling, I took another step back. Magician Man held up his hands. You're right. You look like a young man who knows his rocks. So how about a trade? What's your name? Carlos Buela, I said, cursing the tremor in my voice. I'm Mitch. I'll trade you all of these for yours. He pulled a paper bag from inside his coat. Holding my gaze, he took my hand and dumped in a pile of polished stones. I recognized citrine, amethyst, and chalcedony. Whoa, was that a Herkimer diamond? It seemed like a good deal. The green stone looked ordinary in comparison. Okay, mister, fair trade. I stuffed the stones into my jean pocket and held out the Rock Emporium bag. The sooner I got away from this guy, the better. Take it. Voices made us both turn. The clerk from the Rock Emporium stood at the entrance to the alley with 3 men dressed in black. If they meant well, I'm a billionaire. The clerk pointed at us. Mitch groaned. I thrust the bag at Mitch. Take it and go. Too late. Mitch's fingers encircled my own and the bag of rocks. A green haze covered our hands, and the world exploded in color and light. A thunder like the waterfalls filled my ear, followed by total darkness and silence. Light seeped back into my awareness. I blinked until my vision cleared. The knees of my jeans sank into patches of moss on a cobblestone walk. A brook babbled along the right side of the path, and a wall covered with vines and ferns bordered the other. A damp, musty smell filled my nostrils. I stood on quaking legs. What happened to the alley, the tour shops, and those men? Mitch bent over with his hands on his knees. He took a few ragged breaths. You okay, Carlos? I gasped. I think. Where are we? He brushed the leaves from his coat and straightened his collar. Same place, but we're in 1885. There.
Thank you so much for sharing that excerpt. So in this story, you've used one of my favorite cornerstones of science fiction, time travel. But to me, this is very much a fantasy story. So I wondered if you could speak about the differences in using time travel in a fantasy story versus a science fiction story.
Well, I think for me, the big difference was um, my fantasy is that this is time travel as time travel tourism. And I really didn't, I love time travel stories, but I really didn't want to focus on the real hard facts. What happens if if you change one thing, then all of history changes. I wanted to just focus on the fun adventure aspects of it. So it is really a fantasy, and that there aren't a whole lot of hard and fast rules. And I even state in some of the discussions that, yeah, nothing really changes because, they've all tried to make changes and things only got worse. And I've always thought that, yeah, even if we possibly could go back in time, we're all living in the world that somebody tried to change. So obviously nothing has improved. So I kind of focused on the adventure part of it.
Very fun. Thank you. And Barlow, would you like to share an excerpt from your winning story?
Absolutely. My story is The Boy from Elsewhere, and just a brief summary. It takes place in a dystopian future where school children no longer learn the old-fashioned way by reading books. Instead, their heads are plugged in with cables, and their minds are, updated on a periodical basis, just the way modern computer processors are. Okay, here he goes. He kept to himself, staring into the bound pages that used to charm our forefathers before Philippe's 2056 takeover. The glossiness in the boy's eyes sparkled like the open ocean under a bright sun. None of us wanted anything to do with him and his antiquated ways, but Mrs. Robhart insisted. You children be nice, she said, with furrowed brow. Where he comes from, things are different, I imagine. They have to be. The absence of wiring on his person, his empty hands, unlike those of his new classmates who typed and tapped and scrolled with each passing breath on their handheld devices, and the backpack free of a tablet or a lightweight transparent monitor were alarming to those not familiar with our not too distant past. When alone outdoors, he stared at the blue skies and the swaying trees as if they were the eighth wonder. He inquired about the shiny, decaying structures in the foggy distance, the ruins of which stuck out like fractured dentures. What is that place? He asked, wide-eyed. Yet no one bothered telling him because no one cared anymore. It was as relevant as the technical age that preceded our digital one, as distant as the sparkling dots in the night sky. The city hadn't been inhabited in decades, its purpose as superfluous as sunshine in a volcano. No real D helmet nor any goggles were seen on the boy's squarish head, and his native label was difficult to pronounce. After deliberating, the school board agreed to call him Bizarre, and soon the name hung on the curious lips of every student and faculty. During class immersion, he conversed with a teacher, his speech a product of whispers and muffled syllables slightly below speaking level. The cables ran from our headsets to the central desk hard drive, coiling in knots like serpent's nest, yet no wiring was to be found on Bizarre's desk. He sat properly in a posture indicating a healthy spine, peering at strange paper stacks. Their pages were torn at the corners and faded on both sides, ranging from yellowish white to sunset orange. Even after several suggestions to the contrary by his classmates and teachers, he refused to be plugged. I hardly knew one could do that. They want us to respect the traveler's rights, Mr. Porter said after Jacob complained. He can do as he pleases, according to the new international laws regarding the travelers, to each their own. Can any of us disconnect whenever we want? Amelie Strokes asked. The teacher contemplated, then nodded, leaving us in a state of prolonged confusion. It was well known that a disconnected mind would disintegrate to absolute lethargy before long. The cognizance, or whatever remained of one, would collapse within weeks, if not days. That's what they kept telling us anyway. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Barlow. Barlow, your story focuses on something very dear to me, and startling for culture, the death of reading in a culture. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your ideas of the importance of story, what story means, sharing between human beings, and what you think we can do to combat this attitude of apathy towards reading in our culture.
Well, I mean, it I'm not really sure what can be done about it. It's hard for a hardbound stack to compete with the glossiness and the high definition of these tablets that kids have these days. Um, to me personally, reading is very essential. It is the only way to generate and create unlimited imagination. Where I live now currently, I mean, everywhere you go, you see a person with nothing, who has nothing to do, who is just either waiting or trying to pass the time. Everybody's scrolling, swiping, watching, TikTok videos or what have you. Nobody reads, not adults, not children. I mean, outside of what they have to do for their school assignments, nobody reads for fun. Once children graduate and finish their schoolwork, they have no interest in books anymore, which is really unfortunate. And I'm not really sure how we can combat that.
And Daniel, you illustrated Barlow's story. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process of working with Barlow, and adapting a story into illustration.
Yeah, so like when I read a story, I thought like the whole like premise was like really interesting, and I always like drawing characters. And a thing about Barlow's story was that his main character, like the boy, like there is no description of how he looked like. It was kind of just up to your own interpretation of how the character would look like. And that was like kind of a challenge a bit because I didn't want to like decide how the character looked like because it was in the whole composition, but I kind of just tried to think of like, oh, like what would be like a stereotypical like boy and in this like futuristic world. And I always liked the themes and aesthetics of just like futurism. Like I like the cyberpunk type genre, and then I thought the elements of like chords and like technology over like the children's heads was an interesting idea. So I tried to incorporate all those types of elements within the illustration to kind of just tell, just like give like just all the parts of like what the world is into like one image.
And sticking with Daniel for a moment, can you tell us a little bit about the influence of comic books on your illustrations? And do you have any plans to work on your own comics in the future?
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, I guess I am like a bit influenced by like I like comics, like a lot of like comics is something that I was always into, but I never thought of working in like the comic industry, but like learning more about different like works and like illustrators I've met, like a job that I'd be really into would be like being a cover artist. I thought those would be really cool. And recently, a lot of the stuff I'm trying to do right now would be just like examples of like cover work, like examples like maybe like doing an X-Men cover or like doing Daredevil, which I think is cool. But how comics influenced my work, maybe I think maybe I subconsciously like use like some reference. Like I know the goggles like the kids wear, I always think about like the like Wolverine in like the Weapon X type program where he has like the visor over his eyes and the cables going around everywhere. And maybe that was like I like unintentionally was inspired by that, but looking back, maybe yeah, I kind of was like thinking about what would be a cool like futurism like device kind of headset that they would wear.
Very cool. And Tremini, can you tell us a little bit about your experience working with an author and how you go about adapting a story for illustration?
Well, it was a bit of a compromise between what was playing in my head as I was reading the story. Every time I sit down and start reading something, because I'm very visual, reading the story basically plays like there's a movie with the action and the setting and everything just movie going on. So when I read something, I very much get that visual picture. So it started off with sitting down and really reading the text and going, oh wait, no, this is how he was described, and basically compromising and balancing between what was actually described for the character's description versus what my imagination was giving me as I was reading it, and then trying to bring out the best out of both. Have it look accurate to the description that was in the story, but still give it that science fiction, that a little bit of uncanny feel to it. The story that I was illustrating was actually it was a bit of a challenge because the description was basically that it was taking from the perspective of an AI controlled vehicle. And so the descriptions and everything, yes, there was a bit of description that the car gave as it was analyzing its passenger, but it wasn't like a super, you sit down and you read a Brandon Sanderson and you're like, okay, here's the plants that move, and here's the lightning and the big storms. It was very cerebral and very intellectual. And so illustrating something like that was a challenge, but it was fun. So I think that's the biggest key for figuring out how to do a good illustration is you look at the project that you have, you look at what the description is, you tie that into your imagination and bring a bit of your own heart and soul into it. And then you've got to figure out how to play with it and have fun with it on a technical level as well.
And Charity, I also wonder if you could talk a little bit about your transition from using traditional mediums into working with digital art, and how specifically does your background in watercolor influence your digital work?
Well, basically, I was one of the people that the generation that was fortunate enough to start off before digital painting became a thing. I still learned old school, and so by necessity, I had to have that transition. But what I did, I mean, there are a lot of really great artists that you sit down and you look at their work and it looks exactly the same on so many different levels as so many other artists. And it's because they started off learning digitally. And so they learned how to use a digital tool to create something that looks good, but every single person is using that tool in exactly the same way. And so the art is very, uh, there's not as much variety in it. It's not as unique looking. So having been the older generation where I had to start learning drawing and painting traditionally, that let me develop a bit of my own skill set separate from the digital. So I'm not relying on the digital tool to create for me. I'm using it as just a different kind of paintbrush, essentially. Um, so one of the funnest things that I figured out, there's a book at the there's a library attached to the National Gallery over in Washington, D.C., that has a whole bunch of old master manuscripts and uh, very archaic language, even in these books. But they all talk about drawing and painting and the different methods that they used. And when you sit down and you're talking to someone who does watercolor paintings and oil paintings, there's the term wash or glaze, which is basically a transparent layer of color. Okay, and every art book that I had read previously, every modern art book said it's basically the same thing. It's just a different word for the same thing. If you read those old manuscripts, one of my favorite ones, it actually pointed out that the difference between a wash and a glaze actually had to do with the percentage of how transparent that color was. So they also had other terms. There was, a wash, a tint, a half paste, a paste, and your opaque. So those are all referring to how opaque or transparent your paint is. So when you're reading those manuscripts, they're actually telling you how opaque, how much coverage the paint layer that they're applying had, and how much of the underpainting you can see through it. So you take that old skill set and that old knowledge and you apply that to digital, it's basically just a step-by-step instruction on how opaque or transparent your digital paintbrush needs to be in order to get it to look like a real painting. So it's taking drawing from the history, learning from the past, but applying it to the future in a way that hasn't been done before. Using the past to inform your future.
That is very cool to bridge the past with the future in that way. Shifting gears a little bit here, one of the coolest things about the contest for the winners is the workshop. And I wanted to ask each of you what some of your main takeaways were from the workshop and what the experience was like for you. Let's start with Barlow on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an overwhelming experience, very educational in so many ways. I guess one of the things I learned is that if push comes to shove, we'll be able to create a story in 24 hours. That was definitely a challenge. One of the most memorable aspects of it. Also, having some of the great sci-fi writers of our era, like Orson Scott Card, there giving us advice on narrative perspective and what really works, what sells, what doesn't. That was definitely very valuable, and I hope to use everything that I learned during my week there, in my future writing endeavors.
How about you, Daniel? What was the workshop experience like for you?
So I felt like, yeah, it was like really overwhelming. And I think I learned a lot about all the different illustrators that came here that like from all their like they all had just different experiences of just like coming up and like having their career. And I just that was just so fascinating how they were at like just different points in their career, and they just worked in so many different genres where it wasn't just like fantasy books or sci-fi. They might have done like promotionals or marketing or even like working in games or just is like one work was like doing cards at Target, which I thought was really interesting. And it made me think like how I could use like what they know into like my own career and what I could do and all the different like directions I could go, or I'm not really stuck into one like category of doing one thing. And I just thought it was just cool that I could just like meet them, and then like I got to like talk to them and they showed the work. And I just thought it was just like a really like educational, like just like all the workshops were really cool. And I know I followed like some of the illustrators for like a while, and then meeting them was really cool. So it was a really good experience. Yeah.
Very good point about working in different genres. I mean, Frank Frazetta, who had been a contest judge, not a
Yeah.
lot of people know, but he did Western cover art, which was just phenomenal. You know, he introduced movement into the covers, which not many artists of the day were. So it's a very good point. Um, how about you, Sandra? What were some of your main takeaways and experiences from the workshops?
For me, the whole week was just so over the top. Everyone treated us just so nicely, and I loved meeting all my fellow winners, writers, and illustrators. It was such a great group. Learned so much from them. Love the interaction. I think we really gelled. Uh, Having Jody Lanai and Tim Powers as workshop instructors for a week, it was just amazing. Learned so much from them. We had to write a 24-hour story. Mine was one of the stories that was critiqued, which was really great. I learned so much about my writing process. I never thought I could write a story in that amount of time, but not only did I write it, but I liked what I wrote. And then I got feedback on the story to make it better. And then we had just a parade of famous science fiction and fantasy writers also come and talk to us. It was sort of like Christmas, but you just more presents, just you finding more to open. We had Orson Scott Card came in, and Larry Niven and Nancy Crass, and it was just really just amazing. I learned so much from them, and it was definitely a week I'll never forget.
Very cool. I wonder if anyone's ever thought of doing an anthology of the 24-hour stories. That would be very interesting to read because I know good
Yeah,
stuff is coming out of there.
yeah.
Uh, Tremini, what about you? How was your experience with the workshop? What were some of your main takeaways?
Well, just the sheer amount of content that there was for, learning. By the end of the day, your brain felt kind of numb, but at the same time, you were hyped because, it was so much awesome stuff. But for me, it was getting to meet the other artists, professionals in the industry, get feedback from them, see their work and how they proceeded with their careers, and the opportunities that are out there for artists to make basically you're paving your own path, and figuring out how to navigate the forest and hope you get to the other side still alive, and whoops, there's a wolf, but oh well. But it was something that gave you hope, because there were a lot of different styles and a lot of different career paths and ways that those artists had navigated a professional career. And they were more than happy to answer any questions, and everyone was so extraordinarily helpful and kind.
Wonderful. The pay it forward attitude in science fiction and fantasy is always a heartening thing. Very cool. I've been not involved in any other field that has that kind of care amongst colleagues
Mm.
and peers. Absolutely beautiful sentiment. And Robert, how about you? What was your takeaway from the workshop, and what were some of the highlights of your experience?
Well, number one, it was exhausting. Some days they had us going from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 at night. So it was definitely an intensive week. Couple of things that stand out are well, and as everyone else has mentioned, it's great to meet your heroes and idols and inspirations in the field that we're now getting into. One of the most useful things for me was hearing the stories of other writers and the different ways in which they found their voice in their writing, and realizing that there's many paths to doing that, and that's something that still is ahead for me. But being inspired and getting suggestions from these other, tremendously successful and just tremendously admirable writers and artists gave me some ideas on how to do that. Another highlight was the interview. We writers are expected to go out into Hollywood Boulevard, which is, talk about an alien landscape or a dystopia. Well, there it is right there. And find somebody, who's not going to knife you, and interview them. And so I ended up interviewing a young actor who was portraying Spider-Man in front of Mann's Chinese Theater, which is where I had seen Star Wars when it first came out back in 1977. And just, getting him to talk about his aspirations and how he used Spider-Man in stand-up comedy and so on, and just reminded me and helped me realize that, there are all kinds of stories all around. You just have to be a bit more aware of where you can find them. So overall, now I feel like I was doing really, as an amateur, I was doing really well in college football, but now I'm a rookie in the NFL. So now it's a whole new level of challenge that I have to keep meeting in order to be successful. And the workshop gives you tools to do it, but then we still have to apply them to meet that new challenge.
Very cool. And lastly, before we go, I just want to ask each of you, and let's start with Barlow on this one. What's coming up next for you? What are you currently working on, and what are your plans now that you've won the contest?
Well, the plans are to hopefully someday, in the next few years, publish a full-length novel through traditional publishing, not self-publishing, if possible. As far as what I'm working on, I'm working on so many things that I can never finish, that I never really see too many of them to completion. I'm working on a lot of short fiction. I'm juggling several novels that are in progress, fantasy, sci-fi, even a Western horror one too, which I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know what I'm doing with that one, with those tropes. But yeah, the goal is to definitely publish something in the next few years. Um, to still publish even more short fiction, to get my name out there, to have more credibility with the publishers if and when I actually have a full manuscript to show.
Well, good luck. I'm sure that'll happen sooner than later. How about you, Daniel? What's coming up next for you?
Well, I guess what a plan I'm trying to do is I want to make a book just a portfolio book of just a lot of just cover work of maybe just a lot of just public domain stories, or just like my interpretation of just a lot of those, like maybe like Count of Monte Cristo, and like just different public domain stories, and just try to have my own interpretation and do like mock-up covers for that. And I was thinking of just having it all in just like a complete like one book just full of just a bunch of covers that I could just show, just adding to my portfolio. And I'm gonna try to go to a lot more like cons to meet people. Like I know next year I'm going to Dragon Con with Tremony, and like a few of the other illustrators. We're gonna be there trying to like meet people and just like show our work. So it'll be good.
Very cool. If you find yourself at LostCon this year, come say hi. I'll be there. And WorldCon next year. The cons are fun. You're gonna have a great time. Um, Sandra, what's coming up for you? What are you currently working on?
Well, it's really funny. I actually started my writing career trying to write novels. I actually did write them, but it's so hard to break in with novel length work. So I decided, I'm going to write some short fiction and see if I can get some publishing credits, which I have. But I think in the process, my writing really improved. I think writing shorter with the shorter word count, you have to be, much more direct and really focused. And I think it really improved my writing. And I also discovered I really like short fiction. So I'm going to keep writing short fiction. I really like flash fiction, but I'm also working on a new novel. So I'm going to work on a few projects, and hopefully, I'd like to see a novel published.
Excellent. And Robert, how about you? What are you currently working on? Any books in the work?
Well, they say you should throw away your first novel, so I've done that. I actually got a short story out of that, which I'm trying to sell right now, and I'm working on some others. But um, that's one of the big differences between the era in which Writer of the Future was founded and many of the great masters of the field that we heard about from the workshop, and today is that back in their day, you could earn a pretty decent living from short fiction. Whereas I got paid for a short fiction piece a while ago, and I was thinking to myself, Leigh Brackett probably got exactly this amount of money back in 1940 for what she did. So that's not working out. I still enjoy it, and it's great. It's great fun to do. It's something every writer should do. It really helps you improve your skills and get ideas. But after I get a few of those planned done, I'm going to start again on a novel, which will not be a throwaway, but it's going to be a much more personal work, and so that's going to be my next focus. But I've still got some good ideas to get out before then.
Sadly, for a lot of short story markets, the pay rates are still in the past. They haven't come with us into the future yet. Tremini, what about you? What's coming up next for you, and what are you currently working on?
I'm currently working on expanding my portfolio. A lot of my current pieces are very fantasy focused, and I'm creating some examples of what I can do with some different genre. I'm finishing up working on my tabletop role-playing game. I've been working on both the art and it's a completely new rule system and the adventure guide book. So I'm finishing up those, and I'm starting my first short story to enter the writing side of the writers and illustrators of the future. So cross my fingers, and I'm very glad that no one is going to know which submission is mine until I get good enough to win.
It has been done before. You can do it. Thank you so much, everybody, writers and illustrators of the future winners from Volume 41. Tonight we had Daniel Montefar, Tremini Sutcliffe, Barlow Crasmont, Sandra Skalski, and Robert F. Lowell. Thank you so much to all of you. Congratulations. Thank you to the audience for being here. There is, of course, a link in the chat where you can buy the new anthology here. It's free shipping today from bookshop.org. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll find all that information down below the video. Please make sure to visit all their websites too. More awaits you. Thank you, everybody, and have an absolutely wonderful night.